Hi everybody, welcome back to the Premier Guns YouTube channel, and something a little bit different today. There's been a number of requests for Blazer products. Now, back in sort of 2010 to sort of 2015, we were very heavily involved with Blazer products here in the UK. Primarily the F3 shotgun, and then later on with the F16 when it was released. We don't tend to do a lot with Blazer these days, largely for, well, a little bit for political reasons, but I understand that these are still a popular gun worldwide, and following the request for people to have a look at an F3 and me to have a look at one and review it. It's a gun I'm very familiar with, I've owned several, and we've got an F3 for you today. So, the Blazer F3 was introduced back in 2003-2004, and it was the first shotgun that Blazer ever manufactured. Of course, Blazer are very famous for rifles, and throughout as part of the Blazer group, there's the sort of three strings to the bow, if you like. So you've got Mauser, which is the very traditional rifles, of course manufactured in Germany, going back to probably the First World War, I would have thought. And then you've got Sauer, and Sauer, it kind of sits in the middle, and that's a kind of what's the word I'm looking for, a combination of the sort of traditional and the more modern technologies. And then you go right up to date with Blazer, sort of the R8 straight pull rifles, very popular worldwide, really good quality rifles, and they sort of boast the very latest in terms of technology, specification, performance. So the F3, I remember it coming out. I remember the gun being launched in sort of the shooting press. Historically, back in those days, they were imported by a company called Beechwood Equipment in the UK, and the F3 was kind of revolutionary at the time because it was a really low profile action gun. There was a lot of features with it, which I'm going to talk to you about shortly, but at the time, against everything else, you've got your standard sort of Miracle MK38s, DT10s, and like I said, some of the features on this particular gun were kind of literally, wow, what have they managed to do here? So the gun I've got here is quite a modern one. It's only a couple of years old, and it's one of the higher grade guns. It's called a Grand Luxe. But as with a lot of shotguns, the bare bones of this and the F3 that was first launched back in 2003-2004 are very similar. There has been some upgrades along the way, most notably to do with the way the barrels lock into the action. Well, as you can see, just by putting the gun together, there's a very pretty example too. Super low profile here. So, you know, you look at a Browning, which feels, looking at this, almost twice as deep. If we just open the barrels as well, you can see how narrow that really is. So it's not a Boss style mechanism, it's completely different. Like I said at the time, it was really quite revolutionary, and they were launched at a price point which was kind of underneath something like a DT10. So it was a serious contender for people that wanted to shoot competition clays. They also did a game version. But the reason they were popular is because it's German engineering, ultimately. Let's just move the case out of the way. So the first one I ever saw was a grey action one, which is the traditional one, grey action with F3 on the side. And the F3, I understand, F stands for flint blocker, which is a German word for an over and under shotgun. And the 3, I think, was because it was launched in 2003. So a little bit of history there. But like I say, the features on this gun at the time were sort of, oh, hang on a minute, let's have a look at that. First of all, when you close this thing, it is, without using the German car analogy, it shuts like a Golf. The door of a Golf. It is really smooth, really crisp to shoot. Like I said, I have had a few of these guns, and when they were launched, apart from being really low profile action, it was the first gun really to offer a balancing system. So with this, you had barrel weights, which we've got here, and these very cleverly screw onto the side. So we've got, I think they're 42.5 grams either side. So what that did is it enabled the shooter to balance the shotgun from scratch out the box, because The only balancing system I can ever remember with barrels prior to this was if you go back to the 80s and the sort of Miracle skeet guns, which used to have barrels right at the end of the muzzle. So this was the first shotgun, certainly that I can remember, to have barrel weights, and they just fit on here with two screws that go through the side of the rib. Whereas, of course, we've looked at more recent guns that have got the barrel weights further up here, like the Browning Pro series, which has got a full ventilator rib you can put on wherever you want. So, in addition to that, you had stock weights, which I'm going to talk to you in more detail later on. But what you got basically from that is you got the facility to balance it exactly how you wanted it. If you wanted a heavier barrel gun, you could put the weights on the barrels. If you wanted it more stock heavy, you could wind the actual stock weights down the stock bolt, and that could allow for that as well. So at the time, it was quite a technical gun. It was typically German. It was very well engineered, and on top of that, the way that the actual gun worked, you'd got inline hammers. Now, for people that know how an over-under shotgun tends to work, the actual hammers to set off the firing pins are usually at an angle. So what Blaser did is they came up with this idea of this inline firing mechanism, and what that did is it increased the lock time, and it just made the thing cock a bit quicker as well. So it was a clever bit of kit. These guns were available in sporting specification, but they also did game versions, which, you know, had sort of a narrower rib, less wood in the stock, etc. And on top of that, they did something called a game competition. So there was something really for everybody. But one of the other plus points, or one of the features of this gun, is it was sold based on its modularity. So what you could essentially do is you could have a gun that had got two sets of barrels, and the barrels would literally drop on and drop off and change. They were that interchangeable. My experience is it's not always as straightforward as that, because we've tried to change barrels in the past. They're certainly more modular than the likes of a Browning or a Beretta, which again, still CNC machine, but because of the German engineering that's in this gun, it was really nice to be able to have a set of 32s, have a set of 30s, and just change them over accordingly. So on these guns, a bit more about the mechanics of it. Backboard barrels. Now what they call this barrel system, it's called a triplex barrel system, and I believe that's to do with the boring. So they're overboard, very strong barrels on Blaser. So superior steel shot proofed, even from the day they came out, which is now pretty much 20 years ago. And the Sporters tended to come with, the later ones certainly, the Briley Spectrum extended chokes, which, you know, Briley, very well respected choke manufacturer. Blaser decided to get them to do the chokes. Very good move. Also available in flush. Now, because of the option and the facility to balance this gun, it was kind of a gun that people didn't just shoot plays with the all-show shot game with. And as you would expect with a lot of shotguns, like Parazzis, like, you know, Berettas, they were available in a multitude of different styles and grades. So like I said, this one's called a Grand Luxe. So this is quite a way up from the standard plain action gun. So like I said, originally it was like a grey finish, and then we've now moved on. A modern one is like a black. And what Blaser do is, you'll notice this matte finish on the barrels. That's because what they do is they use a bluing process, but then they nitride on top of the bluing, which gives this really nice, quite, you know, really prestigious kind of looking blued finish. Engraving wise, this is the Grand Luxe model, and it's, as you can see, it's typically German. It's got this very bold Germanic style engraving with the pheasants in the vignette and the scroll work. I'm not a huge fan of it. I prefer the more traditional sort of scroll. I had one of these with a much finer scroll on it, but they do absolutely everything. You know, you've got your machine engraved game scenes, machine engraved scroll. They do hand engraved stuff. They've got the Blaser custom shop. And literally anything is possible with one of these F3s. Because of the inline hammers, and it's got a mechanical trigger. Now, if you look at this gun, for me, there are a few telltale signs that they used the sort of the Krieghoff as a bit of a benchmark, which is another German manufactured shotgun. And I only mean that from the fact that it's got a mechanical trigger, which is really crisp. I've had a lot of shotguns over the years, and to be fair, these triggers are right up there with the quality of Perazzi, Keeman, Gamba, My DT11, etc. Excellent trigger pulls. I think they're both in the catalogue. They're £3. The one I had was certainly extremely crisp on both barrels, and from that point of view, they are an excellent bit of kit. So you've got the mechanical trigger, which I believe is copied from the Krieghoff, but also the barrel selector. Now on the early ones, it was like a little wheel that rolled backwards and forwards, a little knurled wheel, to change the barrels over from top to bottom and vice versa. But it was always a bit tricky. So what they did is they went over to the Krieghoff system, whereby you've got this little paddle in front of the trigger, and you can change it from bottom to top. One of the main advantages of that is I have known people in the past with the likes of things like Berettas accidentally knock it over onto the other barrel when they didn't mean to, when they were putting the safety catch off, etc. It's a small point, but it's probably worth noting. Adjustable trigger. So this one is 32-inch barrel sporter. I think it weighs about £8 4 ounce as it is. And the great thing with these is they were modular, but also from memory, don't quote me on this, I think Blaser used to claim that the barrel weights were all pretty much the same. So if you had a 30 or a 32-inch gun, and these even do 34-inch barrels, it didn't affect the weight. It was just the pointability that you were either gaining or losing depending on your choice of barrel length. Stock dimensions, they did various ones. 40-55 was the standard game drop, which is, to be fair, really low. So 40mm drop at comb, 55mm drop at heel. Very low, too much drop, certainly for most UK shooters. This is a better one. This is 38-50. So this, with only having 12mm drop, was a really nice stock configuration. The one that I owned was actually the same as this. It was a 38-50. And what they did is they went away from the fact that most sporting guns would have 20+mm drop to just sort of 12mm. And what that meant is it meant a more consistent head position, particularly if you were a new shooter. Butt pad, these are standard factory Blaser ones that are grind to fit. The previous owner of this gun has put some horrendous brown leather on the back, I'm guessing for snag-free mounting, but it looks like it's been cut out of the seat of an old Cortina, but that's not for me. So I think we'll probably change the recoil pad on that, or whoever owns it next will probably look at changing the recoil pad. Little bit of a palm swell on the stock on the sporter, nice grip, does feel good to be fair, nice bit of thickness in the comb, and fore-end styles, again, you know, there's a lot of options available with these guns. They do a beaver tail, they do a schnabel, but the majority of the guns I've certainly seen tend to come with this sort of rounded London fore-end pattern. Rib, slightly tapered. Like I said, they do different configurations again, not in the same way that Perazzi do. Perazzi do, you know, dozens and dozens of different rib configurations. But on the standard sporter, I think it's sort of 8.5 to 10, so just a very slight taper. Now these guns are extremely well made, they feel very nice, they handle well, they shoot well. Very popular in the States, as you would imagine, with top competition shooters. And to be fair, in the UK, you will go to a clay shoot, you will probably see 2 or 3. They have certainly got a following, and that's largely due to the level of engineering that are in these guns. I would talk about the ejectors, which is a complicated mechanism. I would certainly not attempt to take them out myself, but they really do work extremely well. The guns eject nicely, but again, it's just that extra bit of attention to detail, extra bit of engineering, which is typically German with this gun. So I talked earlier, just briefly, about the balancing system, which for me, when this gun was launched, was kind of like the standout feature of the Blazer F3. So what you've got is, apart from the barrel weights, in the back of the stock, the actual stock bolt has got weights on which go onto the threaded bar, which is essentially the stock bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how that works and show you the difference in the balance. So at the minute, say 32-inch out the box, you can see this gun is dreadfully barrel heavy. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to whip the pad off the back. So what I've done, I just took the recoil pad off, or slackened the recoil pad off. And then if I put the stock bolt key into the back of the stock and slacken that off, what we will do is we will produce the stock bolt. So that is essentially the stock bolt. So that holds the stock onto the back of the action, but also it is your balancing set. So what you do, just take this rubber bit off the end, and very cleverly you can wind these weights all the way up and down on this threaded bar. Extra weights can be added if required. So like I say, what you can do by doing that is you completely change the balance of the shotgun. So we've looked at it already, it's barrel heavy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, you can do this, there are Allen keys to do this with properly. So what I've done there is I put the weight right at the back of the bar, put that back in there, put the rubber back on the back. So if anything, that might make it stock heavy, but it will certainly reverse the balance from it being barrel heavy. And this is the thing with these guns, you can play around with these. And out of all the balancing systems, I have to say this is probably my favourite. So, I don't worry too much about the pad. Okay, just by changing those, just by putting those weights on that threaded bar, we've pretty much, at the back of the stock, transformed the balance of the gun. That, for me, and like I said, at the time back in 2003, was a real big thing. A bit more about my personal experience with Blaser. Now, we didn't really start selling these guns new until about sort of 2010, which is pretty much when Premier Guns was formed. And at the time, you just couldn't touch it. You know, it was a lot more cost effective than a DT11, a lot less cheap, a lot cheaper than a Perazzi or a Krieghoff. And because of the features, like I said, what they did is they marketed in the UK as what's called a professional. So what you got is you got grade 5 wood, you got the full barrel weight set, you got the full extended choke set, you got the stock weights, you got this extremely nice velour sort of fancy looking case. And like I said, they were such good value because they came with a 10-year warranty. And then of course you could go up in the grades in terms of Luxus, Super Luxus, Grand Luxe, Baroness, I believe they do side plate 1, right up to sort of Imperials, which would cost, you know, north of 20 or 30,000 pounds in the UK. This particular gun, Grand Luxe, grade 7 wood, nicely finished. I don't think that's the original factory finish, that's been done aftermarket. But I would have to say that I think now in 2023, I think the product is a bit expensive. It is for the basic model. I now believe that there are better value competition guns out there, the brands that I've already mentioned. But having said that, these are extremely good shotguns. Certainly from a competition point of view. I've no doubt we'll have a look at one of the high rib versions in the future, the Vantage or the Super Sport or the Super Trap. And again, at the time, they kind of pioneered high rib guns over the last decade. They were one of the first people to sort of go out there and say, look, we need different target acquisition, etc. And they came up with high rib guns. Yes, there was other models available at the time, but I think when you look back at Blaser, that was something that they're always sort of moving forward with innovation. And you know, it's a bit of a shame that we don't supply new ones anymore. But I think largely, the cost now is a bit prohibitive. You can buy some extremely good value second-hand ones, a bit like this, that are sort of a few years old. And that, in essence, is the Blazer F3. Very versatile, very durable. Like I said, just feels typically German. Excellent quality. From the minute you pick it up, the minute you close it, even taking it apart and put it in the box, you just feel like you've got a really good quality piece of kit. And because a lot of people have been asking about a review of this is why we've done one. If you've got any questions about this particular Blaser, please get in touch, comment below, get in touch via email. Like I said on previous videos, no problem to export all over the world. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.